house needs to be allocated and assigned. It is not knowing your role that is causing the conflict in your marriage. 50-50 doesn't work. It's never worked. It never has worked. It's not going to work. So why are you trying to buck the system? Every single place has a system. The government, the schools, your work, everything has a system. Everyone plays a role. If I have to do everything anyway, why don't I just go ahead and get divorced? Well, if you're divorced, you're still gonna have to do everything anyway. This makes no sense. So women, you're pointing your finger at your husband that he's the problem, but he's not the problem. Welcome to the Marriage, Money, and Mindset podcast. I am Monica. Are you exhausted? Do you have just more on your to-do list than you can possibly get done in one day? Are you completely just overwhelmed, feeling like you're just drowning, barely surviving? Well, it's likely because you don't know your role. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We have a funny expression in my house. We say, know your role. It's kind of jokingly, but we're not going to be talking it like that. We're going to be talking about knowing your role and what you are bringing to the table in the partnership that we call marriage. Now, every single system has a hierarchy. It has a structure in place to allow it to function properly. So let's take school as an example. Let's say that the principal decided that she wasn't in the mood to answer anybody's questions or to handle the daily administrative tasks. What if the PE teacher decided that they thought the bathrooms were pretty dirty, so let's go and focus on cleaning that? What if the lunch lady decided that instead of cooking meals and making sure that the kids are fed, that she would then just decide to teach second grade? What happens? Utter chaos happens. The kids wouldn't get fed, the trash wouldn't get taken out, there would be nobody being holding all the other positions accountable. The whole system would be thrown into chaos and would completely shut down. It just would be a complete disaster. And this is also true at work. You have your boss, you report up to him. You could be the boss, they report up to you. But everyone knows their position and what exactly that position entails. And they don't go about and step over and try to do jobs that are not theirs. And why? Because the system would go into complete and utter chaos. But the problem is, in our marriage, we are not treating it like a system. But it is. This is why you will find that there's a lot of conflict in marriage, is because there's not a system in place. And that is what I mean when I say that you need to know your role. When people don't know their role, their entire things break down. You get stressed out and things get contentious when there doesn't need to be conflict and contention there. You'll get stressed, you'll get overwhelmed, things get missed, and the whole thing is a complete disaster. And so I ask you to consider, what does your marriage look like in regards to a system? Do you have one in place? Do you know your role? What are you responsible for doing? Every single task in your house needs to be allocated and assigned. Every single thing in the nuance of living and taking care of the family and the household has to be delegated to somebody. Now, I personally don't know any married woman who's actually working outside of the home who is not completely overwhelmed. They feel that their weight is on their shoulders. They are stressed out. They are trying to be out into the workplace and contribute financially because that's what society's told them to do. They're out doing their boss babe thing, right? When you come home from being boss babe, then you come home and you have to then take care and start your second job, which is taking care of the house. Getting the laundry and the cooking and taking care of the kids and the school and the paperwork and the homework, and then trying to also take care of your body physically, right? To make sure you're exercising, drinking enough water, eating healthy foods, and it is just overwhelming. So what's the answer? There's several. But as far as the day-to-day living in your home and making sure once you get done from work, if you're working, knowing your role is probably going to make the most significant impact to making your day and your life go much smoother. I actually realized the impact that knowing your role can have in relationships from watching a fictional show. called The Big Bang Theory. Really great show if you guys haven't seen it before. But the two main characters, Sheldon and his girlfriend Amy, they enter into a relationship. Now, they are both brilliant, and equally as brilliant as they are equally socially awkward. This whole navigating relationships, they just know quite not to do. So what they did is they created what's called a relationship agreement. The Big Bang Relationship Agreement is a document that Amy and Sheldon created that allowed them to easily and quickly navigate any kind of disagreement. Because what happens is they have outlined every single role or position or situation that they could think of and how to handle it. For instance, they were trying to discover whose turn it was, which family they were going to visit for Thanksgiving. And they actually opened it up and said, oh, on odd years, we're going to go to Amy's house.
Agreement. A binding covenant that in its 31 pages enumerates, iterates, and codifies the rights and responsibilities of Sheldon Lee Cooper, here and after known as the boyfriend, and Amy Farrah Fowler, here and after known as the girlfriend.
So romantic.
Like it's all laid out. They knew with precision exactly how they were going to handle every single disagreement, argument, role within the relationship. I thought it was brilliant. Now, you don't have to get that crazy, write it all down, but taking these two concepts of knowing your role and where you stand as far in the system as a work system, and then merging this with this relationship agreement, if you can come up with a verbal agreement of who's going to do every single task in your household that has to get done just in the daily course of living, you are going to be able to navigate your relationship so much better. Can you imagine never having to argue about who's responsible for doing the dishes or taking out the trash or doing laundry or picking up the kids or changing the oil or anything of this nature? You already know. You guys have already discussed this. You've already agreed to it. How much better and smoother would your life be if you could agree on these things ahead of time? It is not knowing your role that is causing the conflict in your marriage. It could be things like who cooks, who cleans, who goes shopping, who watches the kids, who takes them to the birthdays, who's responsible for shopping for the kids' birthday presents, who is responsible for changing the cat litter box, who is responsible for feeding the pets, who is responsible for making the bed. Every single item and task has to be delegated. And every single task does not have to be delegated to either the husband or the wife. You can delegate jobs to many different people. For instance, the lawn care, you can hire a company. The backyard, the pool service, these things can be hired out. Well, Monica, you might say, why can't we just go 50-50? Why does every single task and responsibility have to be delegated? Well, the answer is because 50-50 doesn't work. It's never worked. It never has worked. It's never going to work. So why are you trying to buck the system? Every single place has a system. The government, the schools, your work, everything has a system. Everyone plays a role. And it doesn't matter what the title is. It doesn't. Because remember, in your marriage, you're a team. And you're going to handle one thing, you're going to handle another. And you have to talk and discuss and figure out who's responsible. Because if something's not assigned, it gets missed, it gets dropped. It doesn't flow right. It doesn't work. So I had this friend who was upset because she came home after a long day of work and she saw her husband just laying on the couch. The kitchen wasn't clean. There was dishes in the sink. And that's the last thing you want to do when you come home is to have more work to do. But that's what happened. So she was upset that her husband was just laying on the couch and there was dishes in the sink and he didn't proactively take the steps to do the dishes before she got home. So I asked her, I said, well, whose job is it to do the dishes? And she said, well, most of the time I do the dishes. And then I said, well, if you do the dishes most of the time, why would he think that he needs to do the dishes? And she's like, well, I just thought that he should, see that I had a long day at work. And I'm like, well, did he have a long day at work? And she's like, well, yeah, he did. And I'm like, and most of the time he knows that you normally do it right. And she's like, yeah. I was like, but nobody has a specific assignment. It's nobody's job to do the dishes, right? And she's like, right. And I was like, well, what about your son? She's like, well, he helps out here and there. You see, now we have complication because She's upset that her husband's not doing a job that he was never tasked to do. She was never tasked to do it either. However, she took it more as a primary role. All of this conversation, this frustration, this anger, this resentment she was building because she had a long day at work because nobody was assigned a role. And that's what happens when you don't have a specific person in charge of a specific task. You get resentment, you get bitterness, things get dropped, things get missed. Conversely, we went on a trip and we were visiting some friends staying at their house. And so I don't ever like when I'm staying at the house and there's a family, I'm contributing to the mess of the house, doing the dishes and stuff. So I help out where I can, putting things away. And then we were getting ready to go out for dinner one night and I walk into the bedroom with her to use a curling iron or check out her earrings. Whatever us girls do. We got to see what's in the closet and all that. Well, we walked by, there's a big mass pile of clothes. They had been washed, but they'd been sitting there ready to be folded and put away. So I said, oh, do you want me to just quick? I can help you real quick. We can tackle this laundry. She said, don't worry about it. That's my husband's job. And I thought, that's awesome. She's like, no, yeah, I'm in charge of the dishes and he's in charge of the clothes. So what happens there? She has her mental space cleared up. She can walk by something that's not done, that's not her assignment, and she knows that she did her part, she did the dishes, and she's able now to go off of life. Have you ever really been struggling to lose weight? I know for me, particularly being after 40, I was having problems. I was tired of looking at pictures and being disappointed about how I looked in them, or trying to hide behind somebody, or just feeling my clothes just a little bit too snug. And I knew that if I kept on doing the same thing, I wasn't going to get any different result. And that is why I invented the fat burner bombs. This bad boy is chock full of premium ingredients that may just be the answer you've been looking for to give you more energy, to increase your metabolism, and to burn more fat. Give it a try. We have a money-back guarantee, so there's never any risk to you. Grab yourself a bottle of Fat Burner Bombs by heading over to monicaalmaguer.com/shop and enter in the promo code marriage to receive 40% off your very first order. Fat Burner Bombs, so you could be the bomb. What happens is when every single person has their role, every single person knows their job, their task, it frees up the mental space. It frees up your mind. And I always tell my husband, I tell my grown sons, you know what? For women's minds, everything, every little subject is like a computer tab that's open. And you might have a tab open for the kids, and a tab open for your job, and a tab open for your kids' school and for the kids' sport. And those tabs never close. So how wonderful would it be to actually finally be able to close a tab? You can close the laundry tab because that's not your job anymore. And think how much brain space you can actually close down because you don't have to think about certain things. I don't know if your school is like ours with our kids, our 10-year-old twins, but we get emails. And my husband will ask me, hey, did you see that email from the school about XYZ? I'm like, yeah, I've told you don't need to worry about it. I'm in charge of the school. He's like, well, sometimes you might miss it. Well, yeah, sometimes I might miss it. And that's okay. That's okay. 9 times out of 10, I don't. But he doesn't need to utilize that brain space because I've got it. Well, then what happens if you go about the steps of delegating a task to everybody and then they don't do their job? Well, if it's just a hit and miss, on a whole, they're doing pretty good. And they're human. Once in a while, you're going to not do the job. And that's okay. Let's talk about the benefits of knowing your role. Number one, you're going to free up a lot of brain space. Imagine if you have 100 things you have to think about on a day, cutting that in half. Cutting those things in half. Now you don't have to think about that. That just actually frees up so much mind space and takes so much off your shoulders. It is something that is amazing. Marriage is supposed to make your life easier. You're not supposed to be married and then have the same burdens as a single person. It's actually supposed to be easier. And this is one of those ways to do it. Another benefit is that when you actually sit with your husband and you're laying out, hey, I'm responsible for this, and you're responsible for this, and it's very easy to see that there's a lopsided distribution of tasks. So if you have, let's say, a stay-at-home mom. And so therefore, she should be responsible for everything in taking care of the home, right? That's her literal job. The husband's literal job is to bring home money that's on one of his tasks, on one of his role. So, but then nowadays we have women, most of us, who are working at least part-time, some outside the home, some full-time, and they're coming home and they're still taking on the majority of the housework. And there's a lot of resentment being built. But when you're able to sit down and be like, I'm responsible for this, you're responsible for this, it's very easy to see, hey, oh, I'm not doing my part. I should be doing more. Look, this is not fair that she's taking on that much more. So when you lay it out, it's very easy to see if there's a really bad lopsided distribution of responsibilities within your family. Another benefit of knowing your role is that you're going to prevent a ton of arguments. You're not going to be expecting someone to help you on your task. You and you alone are responsible for your task. And he happens to want to help you, or you want to help him because you have extra energy that day, or he had a very long day at work, or he's been super busy, or you just want to be a loving partner for your auntie and help them out. Cool. That doesn't change who the responsibility ultimately lies upon, but that doesn't mean that you can't help them. But it's going to prevent all those arguments about who is in charge of what. Another benefit when you actually lay out your roles is that it's going to give you a very clear indication of expectations. I always say that there's only two things that will ever cause problems in your relationship. The one is unmet core needs, and then the second one is a gap in expectations. So when you are laying out your roles, a lot of times there's things that I call like man work. I was upset with my husband the other day because we had in Las Vegas a big downpour. We don't get rain very often. And so if we get a pretty decent storm that actually comes in, we'll get a lot of rain all at once. Well, we had a storm and we had leaks. Well, between that storm and about a month goes by and a second storm comes in. He never called a roofer. So the second one comes in and there's more leaks, right? We're putting buckets out and I'm like, oh my gosh, we just got the house painted. Now we're getting the drywall on the ceiling is starting to bubble, and I'm pissed. I'm upset. Why? Because it's not the first time. It's the first because he didn't take care of his obligation, because the things having to do with fixing the house, things having to do with fix the car, things having to do with fixing technology. That's man's work. Taking out the trash, that's man's work. All right, I know that in this day and age that we're not supposed to have these delegated roles and that women can do everything and the men can do everything and there should be no such thing as men and women work. But you know what? In my marriage, that's man's work and I should not have to do it. And so when he said, hey, can you call roofers tomorrow? I was mad. Because first of all, he knew it was going to be, he had a full month to take care of this. And then second, he was trying to offload his job onto me, and I was already busy and I already had a lot of other things on my plate. And you want me to add your stuff onto my plate? No. So I said, listen, I'm not okay with this. He's like, well, I'm too busy at work. I work just because I work at home. Yeah, you have more flexibility. Yes, I do. I do have more flexibility. But don't tell me you don't have time at work. You get a lunch break. You have other times that you could do it. So I was upset because in my mind, not only was this his task, he was trying to offload it onto me. And then on top of it, it was man's work. So that was a discussion that is kind of like out of the norm that I was upset with because it wasn't my job. And I was able to call around a little bit, and I told him what I'd do. But he got the ear from me of when he was trying to make his job mine. That was not cool. Another benefit of knowing your role is that you can approach living as a team. Everyone has a part in this team. It's like a relay race, when you're racing and you hand out and pass the baton. You're all in this race called life. And your job as a husband and a wife and the family members, you all pitch in and you all get life done. So let me ask you, what is your role in your marriage? Which things are you and you alone going to be responsible for? Which things are you going to say, hey, the buck stops with me? I'm going to take 100% responsibility for this particular thing. That's what you need to ask. So now that you know the benefits of knowing your role, how do you decide? How do you test this out and divvy everything up to make sure that everything it goes smoothly? Well, I'm going to ask you to consider these things. Consider your work schedule. You're going to consider who's at home. I work from home. I have a lot more flexibility, so therefore I take on a lot of that at-home jobs. Another thing to consider is who cares about it more. Let's say that you just cannot stand when dishes are in the sink, and so you want to make sure that they're into the dishwasher or everything, that sink is cleared. If a task is something that you really care about personally, then you should take it on. Or if it's a case where, let's say, you're very particular about how things are done, then you might want to be the person in charge of that. Another thing to consider is who actually enjoys doing it. There's certain things that people enjoy. For instance, let's say you just love being out in the garden and pulling weeds and it's very therapeutic to you. You should probably be the person in charge of the landscaping and yard work. If you're a person who loves cooking, you should probably be in charge of the cooking. If you're a person who just really gets satisfaction from cleaning and having the household really nice and sparkly, maybe you should be the one in charge of that. So that's something to consider as well, as who actually likes doing which tasks. Another thing to consider is, are there things that mentally you just think that the husband or the wife should be doing? For instance, I think women should not be taking out the trash. Now, I'm fine taking the trash from the house to the trash can outside, but getting the trash can out to the curb and then back into the garage, that's man's work. There is, in my mind, there's man's work and there's women's work. Now, you might not have that case, but there are certain things that I don't want to have anything to do with changing oils or technology or anything of that nature. If it comes to technology, cars, outside lawn care, no, sorry, that's man's work. I'm not doing it. Conversely, there's also things that your partner, your spouse might say, hey, that's woman's work. That's something you as a woman should be doing. You should be caring for the kids. You should be the one cooking the meals. They might be the way. There's not wrong or right. It just really depends on the dynamic. So having this discussion is there something that you consider important in that particular gender role? And that also goes back to kind of an expectation level, the expectation for what a husband should do. Are you the type of wife who believes the husband should be the one making the money? He, as his role as the man, should be the one providing, that you as the woman should not have to take on a job outside of the home. These are things, these expectations that yield into the daily operations and who should be doing these tasks. These things need to be discussed. There's also some things that I want you to consider with this whole thing. And number one is realize that nobody is perfect. Even if you delegate a role to somebody or you agree to take on a specific task in your home, then you need to realize that sometimes it won't get done. And you have to be okay with that. I am not saying that that person has zero accountability. What happens is sometimes that a person will say, okay, I'm going to take on that job, and then they come to find out they're not doing it. Okay, that means that person should not be in charge of that. Either you need to hire that out, you need to really delegate that task to somebody else, but obviously they have shown that that's not going to work. So let's say your husband decides that he is going to take out the trash. He's going to be responsible for that. And then every single trash day comes around and he misses it and trash is piled up. And if that happens once or twice, that's fine. You know, you won't die living with extra trash for a little bit. But if you're noticing that every single week he's not taking it out and that now you're living with the stench of this pile of trash that's never getting taken to the curb, okay, now we have to redelegate. So you're going to call him out, but not in the way that you think you're going to call him out. You're going to call him out by saying, hey, I've noticed that the trash hasn't getting taken out. We're getting a pile. Now we have flags. I'm worried about, maggots. Like, you can just say this with coming from a place of compassion and helpfulness. So I've noticed that you said that you're going to take this out. You didn't take it out. It's been 3 weeks now. Do we need to reassign this? What's going on? And he's going to then realize, oh my gosh, I did say that I was going to do this. I'm not keeping to my word. And it's going to create an internal conflict within himself to do better or acknowledge that, hey, yeah, he's right. He should not have taken that task on. So you will have to tweak your initial role, your initial delegation of who's in charge of what. Another thing to consider is that not everything having to do in your household that needs to get done has to be done by the two of you. If you have children, offload what you can to them. A lot of times we need to hire help. We need to hire people that can help us do the pool or the yard, or a house cleaner every 3 weeks to do the deep cleaning. Maybe you guys are in charge of the keeping up the clutter, but the deep cleaning, like the toilets and the windows, all that stuff needs to be hired out. Maybe you need to hire somebody to clean your cars so that that frees up more time for you to do other important things, like, hanging out with your kids. So hire out where you can hire out. If you can afford to be there, you really need to analyze how much time you have. Do you have more time than money? Typically, when we're young, we have more time than money, and so it behooves us to spend the time. But as we get older and we're getting into a more financially stable situation, sometimes spending your money to free your time is something that's smart. Another thing you need to realize that it's okay to ask for help. Sometimes you might be extra busy at work. You might be in just a season where you might be sick, and hey, these normal tasks and responsibilities that you have taken on and agreed to in this season, that you're going to need extra help with that. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to give help. And I actually encourage you to look for active ways that you can make your spouse's life easier on a consistent basis. Is there anything I can do to help you? If you don't mind bringing in the trash one time, it's out there, the trash man's come, your husband's not gonna be home for 5 hours and you want to go pull it in, go pull it in. But if you don't want to, that's fine too. No skin off your back. If you decide not to help in that manner, you have your own jobs to take care of as well. I believe not knowing your role is one of the biggest factors for why marriages end up failing and couples end up getting divorced. Because over time what happens is you have both a husband and wife working full-time outside of the home, and then what happens is the wife comes and she's taking on this unproportional amount of responsibility with the household and with the children, because society still deems it that way. And I'm not saying it should be or shouldn't be that way. What I'm saying is that the fact of the matter is, if you choose to work outside the home, as a woman, you're still going to take on the responsibility. So now really women are working 2 full-time jobs, and the weight of the world is on their shoulders, and it just creates this really awful bitterness that your husband's not doing his part. You're like, well, why am I even married? Isn't marriage supposed to make my life easier? Here I am, I'm doing everything anyway. Why don't I just, if I have to do everything anyway, why don't I just go ahead and get divorced? Well, if you're divorced, you're still gonna have to do everything anyway. This makes no sense. Why these women are like, well, I have to do everything anyway, so I'm gonna divorce my husband. Well, great, you just broke up your family and you're gonna have to do everything anyways. So women, you're pointing your finger at your husband that he's the problem, but he's not the problem. The problem is you have too many things on your shoulders. And you're gonna need his help to offload some of those, true. But he is not the only solution. He's not the only solution. There's a lot of answers here, but just pointing that he's the problem is not going to be fruitful, because the problem has to do with the sheer volume of things on your shoulder, not him. You have to offload and get this weight of all these things off your shoulders. You got to close down some of those tabs, right? So you have to start re-examining your life. Maybe your husband needs to take on a second job. Sometimes you need to go part-time. Sometimes you need to just quit your job completely. Well, I can't quit my job because I need both incomes to live. Well, maybe you can live somewhere cheaper. There's always options. You can't have your cake and eat it too with everything. Sometimes you have to make tough life choices and reevaluate your finances and humble yourself and go down to not as nice cars because you're completely stressed out. There's a lot of things you have to evaluate. Sometimes you have to hire out more help. Sometimes if you're working full time, now you have to hire out help for your child, for childcare. You have to help out. They now have these apps where you can have somebody do your laundry. Maybe you need to hire somebody to come in a couple of days to help you cook or clean, or just to give you that free time with your husband so that you can have a life. Maybe the fact is that you don't have too much on your shoulders. Maybe you're just not as organized as you could be. Maybe you can run your life more efficiently. You can watch some YouTubes to get yourself more organized and utilize time organization a little bit better. So I hope today was helpful for you. I hope you understood why it's so important to know your role, and that this will help you systemize your marriage so that you can have a peaceful, joyful, and wonderful household.